Lovely. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining this session. And again, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mary for inviting me as the guest speaker for this session. Welcome, everyone. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear what I'm saying and you can see my movements clearly. Lovely. I would appreciate it if you, all of you, could turn on your camera so I can, engage with you guys and, have a bit more conversation and interaction with you. But if you cannot, don't worry, it is not obligated as well. So again, thank you very much for attending this session on time. Today, we are actually going to be spending about an hour and a half with each other. I'll mainly be the Faci to, deliver some contents to you all. Hi, Bobo. It's been a while as well. Hope you still remember me. um, yeah, so I'll be mainly, facilitating the session, but there will be spaces for you guys to do some self-journaling as well as some sharing as well. So if you have maybe a notepad and a pen, or maybe if you use your laptop to take some notes, it would be very helpful. So now, what I will do is I am going to be presenting and I will be sharing my screen. So do let me know when you can see my screen. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen. Lovely. So while I'm presenting, so just a quick check, right? For example, right now on the screen, do you see two gray bars or do you just see the presentation?
Just the presentation.
Just the presentation. All right. Lovely. So at any point of time, if there are some elements that obstructs the screen, do let me know so I can fix it as well. Again, welcome everyone to this session. Just a very quick self-introduction. My name is Jack. I was the MCP 1819 for Isaac in Cambodia. It has been a while since I have left Isaac and I have been to other places, namely working for a for a healthcare company. And then now I'm back all the way back to my home. But I just wanted to spend some time, maybe a minute, just to give you a bit of my credentials. I've spent about 6 years working in Isaac. My last role was the MCP for Isaac in Cambodia. And since I became MCP, I have been actively chairing around the region as well. So thus far, some of the MCPs would recognize me because I recently chaired their conferences, or you may have engaged with me in prior sessions. So these are sort of in the 6 years that I spent in Isaac, not only do I spend it in Cambodia, in Malaysia, but I also try to expand my view as well as my network throughout the entire AP region. Right after my experience as an MCP, I went to work for International SOS, which at the time is Isaac's global partner, as their GC as well as their project management executive. My last role is in Singapore, so I spent 2 years over there, to which now I'm back to Malaysia. And over the last 6-7 years, I've had the opportunity to live in Malaysia, Cambodia, as well as Singapore. And if Isaac is one of the things that I am very proud to in this Isaac experience is that on screen you would see 17 countries. Most of this, if not all, is all because of Isaac. And so I'm very happy and very lucky that I get the experience and the exposure given directly and indirectly because of Isaac. And all of these experience allowed me to have external perspectives as well as learning some hard truth post MCP experience. And so just right before we start, I wanted to take a quick minute, just get a sense. If you can just type in your chat from 1 to 10, how relevant do you think Isaac is to the world right now? 10 being very relevant, 1 being irrelevant. So just type in the chat and let me know, So we have 9, very relevant. 9, 11, technically 11 is not on the scale, but your RO, so I give you that. 8, 10, 8. So I see majority of the answers is leaning towards the relevant side, whereby we all, including me, myself, we all feel and think that Isaac is still very relevant to what the world needs right now. And so in this session today, we are going to explore a little bit about this particular topic. Now, since the time I left Isaac, the world has changed substantially. One of the most important thing is that, what we have is a global pandemic. This figure is updated about an hour and a half ago. We are very close to 500 million population that has contracted COVID-19. We are just over 6 million deaths in just a short span of 2.5 years' time. And so global pandemic has truly changed how this world works. And so one of the main things as well is that we are not just living in a static world. We don't just revolve ourselves around the pandemic. There are multiple different external things, major happenings around the world as well. So I just want to bring to you some your attention to this. Number one, definitely, we are facing a public health crisis. Then, of course, recently, we also, over the last 2 years, we've witnessed multiple international conflicts, all the way from a simple border skirmish to a full-on invasion right now. Obviously, we see some increased inequalities where you see corporations and those that are rich are getting richer, those that are poor are getting poorer. People who are forced to work and risk their lives, called essential workers, are usually those in the lower to middle income class. Those that are fortunate enough to work from home, all of us, we still observe a bit of increase in inequalities over the last 2 years. We also see, because of the pandemic, people's mental health are deteriorating. We see a lot of people are facing an increased social isolation. They are fearful towards their family and themselves. So, a worsened mental health. Last but not least, we also witness a global supply chain disruption. We see the companies not being able to source materials. If you're a gamer, if you're into PC building, I'm sorry, graphic cards is very hard to come by right now. PS5 is very hard to come by right now. Samsung has to reduce their phone production because of chips. So global supply chain disruption. And all of these trends, all of these major happenings contributed to new trends and new happenings and new direction. And so this brings us to the objective of the session today. In today's session, we are going to cover two main objectives. Number one is how Isaac can capitalize on external trends and understanding what are these trends that are present right now. Number two is to manage risks from changing or managing these external trends. And so, without further ado, let us hop into the first one. Now, I have split 6 different categories of external trends to facilitate in this discussion. Don't worry if you can't, note down. You will be. I will send the slide to all of you afterwards. So if you want to take a picture right now for your reference, do go ahead. If you want to take some notes, feel free to go to. But don't worry, you will have access to these slides afterwards. 6 of these categories, I'll talk about 3 first. Number 1 is workplace, tourism, as well as healthcare. Now, specifically in workplace, we see, because of the global pandemic, as well as border restrictions, public health restrictions, so on and so forth, we see several major trends coming up in the workplace category, where you have critical sectors and essential workers now being the main focus. And we understood that they are the ones who truly drive the economy. Then obviously you have remote work and return to office options. You have a lot of people starting to find job opportunities that offer remote working options. And people are starting to be more aware that, hey, I don't really need to be in the office to be productive. Because people are starting to work from home, bosses and managers starting to collect data, starting to monitor by installing softwares or productivity apps in employees' laptop. Therefore, there's an increased data collection as well as privacy concern for people that are working from home and remotely right now. And obviously, the fact that we are now using Zoom just to have this conversation showcases how far we've truly moved on from physical conferences, physical sessions, technology reliance. That sort of concludes the major trend for workplace. And in tourism, because of border restriction, governments are now focusing on domestic tourism. Now, this is one of the most important thing in the next 2 to 3 years' time, especially when countries are starting to open up, and in countries that still faces a lot of COVID cases as well as restrictions. But one particular thing that I want to bring to your attention is the decimation of small businesses. When I was in Cambodia, I went to Siem Reap, which is where Angkor Wat is. And one of the things that jumped out to me is how many small vendors and local business people rely on tourists, rely on the tourism sector. I'm pretty sure, countries that rely heavily on tourism, such as, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, even Nepal, you see a lot of smaller businesses suffer because the sudden lack of tourists, as well as the lack of support from government. Therefore, this is a major key trend that's happening right now in the tourism industry. We see businesses shutting down. Then obviously you have healthcare, you have physical health, social health, and mental health awareness, as well as concern. Now, I don't need to spend much time on this because we all know what's going on in the healthcare industry. But what I want to point out is social health. Now, we all are required to stay at home. We all are required to stay 6 feet apart. We all are required to not attend large-scale gathering. The inability for us and for children and young people to go out and network and meet people has severely impacted our ability to network and build our early career, as well as created this sort of bubble, this sense of isolation that we're alone and that we feel lonely. So that's something that I want to point out for you guys. Moving on, the next 3 category includes supply chain, talent, and education. Now, in supply chain, there is a general deglobalization effort and regionalization. What I mean is, previously we may eat, tomato that is sourced from Australia, apple that is sourced from the Philippines, or blueberries that are sourced from, say, Indonesia, for example. But because of border control, border restrictions, as well as the critical sector, not enough people working, transporting, in logistics, in the truck industry, so on and so forth, we see a dwindling supply of international goods, especially from countries that are super far away from our region. Therefore, taking one of the good case practice, for example, Zara, where the fast fashion brand, where not only do they source products from 6,000 kilometers away from, say, the States from India, they have regional hub, Amazon as well, and then you have Alibaba, all of these big logistic companies as well as fast fashion industries, they are now moving into regionalization. So in the next 1 or 2 years, you'll be expected to see a lot of companies setting up regional hubs. Moving on to talent, you have the Great Resignation. We observe it whereby people are starting to leave their job to spend time back home, or they're starting to choose remote work option and are pivoting to other industry. Or we see the entire aviation and airline industry get decimated in the first 2 years of the pandemic. Therefore, stewardess, pilots all need to find other job. But one thing in particular I want to point out is a decreased global opportunities because of visa restriction. Now, globally, we see a lot of countries are still maintaining a very strict border control. That's why it's very hard for young people like you and me to go to another country to find a new career opportunity. And we're now limited to very selected few countries. Last but not least, education. You have remote learning, tech-based skills, as well as reshaping of the industrial demands. Tech-based skills right now are super in line with whatever that is happening in the world right now, because we all rely on technology. That's how we drive the economy. And so in terms of developing young talents in the education sector, tech-based skills are very important. Now, I spoke for about 7 to 10 minutes, just going through really quickly about all these external trends. And I am very sure that all of you would have noticed that not all of these trends are relevant to Isaac. Because at the end of the day, right, we can't, as an organization, we have limited resources, we have limited time and effort. We can't just be looking at every single trend that may be beneficial to Isaac and jump onto all of this without consideration on how we spend our time, effort, and manpower. And so one of the key things to understand and remember is that demonstrating relevance is key to survival and growth. So the question I want to ask all of you today is, what is Isaac's relevance? To answer this question, I would like to ask a follow-up question. What is Isaac's promised contribution? What do we actually contribute to the society? What do we actually give to the world? Ladies and gentlemen, pre-pandemic, what we as an organization promised that we want to deliver to young people and to the society are two things. Number one is that we promise to promote volunteerism. We work with different organizations. We are a platform-based organization where we connect different partners with young people so that they get volunteer and internship opportunities in these organizations. If you actually go through Isaac portal, you'll discover that majority of our projects are education-based. 6 weeks, go somewhere else, teach children. It's also short-term. What we also promise is that we want to promote cultural understanding as well as tourism. A very quick scan on most major entities' marketing Facebook page, you would see that part of GV, GE, and GT's value proposition is that you get to travel to somewhere else, live in that particular country, understand their culture, and assimilate yourself with their lifestyle. That's what Isaac promotes. The second part to what Isaac wants to deliver is the opportunity to develop themselves. And we rely heavily on volunteers, self-learning and realization. We have the entire inner-outer journey. But at the same time, we also rely heavily on external organizations training. We don't particularly provide a curriculum. We don't particularly provide a framework. We usually depend on the partners to teach them and to develop them. And in those processes, the volunteers would go through self-learning and realization. And so one of the main problems for Isaac is that we do not actually have something that we can call Isaac's curriculum. There is no Isaac's training plan. We don't actually own the part on personal development. And if you still do not see where I'm leading to, what we actually delivered pre-pandemic, what we most likely delivered as a global organization is, instead of volunteerism, we promoted voluntourism. Because all these years that I've been in Isaac and out of Isaac and all these conversations, one thing is always, we are always questioned on our societal contribution. It is very hard for Isaac as a global organization to point towards a particular project and say that this is a long-lasting, sustainable impact that we've delivered to the society. One thing in particular, you like it or not, is that the amount of cases and stories that Isaac has had in terms of exploitation, potential exploitation of underprivileged groups, where you have volunteers, cycling volunteers in underprivileged children's school with no regards to their mental health development, with no regards to training the volunteers and just putting them there for 6 weeks' time. That's what a lot of entities has faced. And last but not least, there's a lack of volunteer training and protection. There is a lack of volunteer training in terms of how you can teach children. There is not much credentials that goes behind this. And if any, when EPs do face any problem, it usually takes quite a bit of time before it goes to ECD and ICD. In terms of personal development as well, what is most likely delivered by Isaac is an outsourced development model where we do not directly involve ourselves to develop volunteers and EP. What we do is that there is no measurable KPI on leadership development. By the end of the experience, we can't actually measure, do they become a better person with better leadership skills. What we also do not deliver is an actual training plan or curriculum to EPs, sometimes to members as well. And the proof of this is that Isaac has been operational for about 70 years. And in these 70 years, there is a lack of proof and example that we can point to saying that this particular person became this particular person because of their Isaac experience. Looking at this, what we understood, and especially what I realized over the last 2-3 years, is that Isaac has always struggled to reconcile the difference. We promise EPs and members that so long as you go through this volunteer journey, you'll be able to develop yourself. We feel it very clearly as members because it's very clear for us. There are goals, there are KPIs for us to achieve. But for our customers, our clients, it's very hard for us to maintain that connection of personal development and volunteerism, which is why a lot of entities face questions on relevance. What made it even worse is during pandemic, the entire platform of traveling and volunteering and international development, this entire thing was taken away from Isaac. And what we are left with are just the personal development side. So the question I really want to ask all of you guys today, a question that I have asked myself repeatedly when I was MCP, is what is Isaac actually selling? All of you guys are here today because you are elected as MCPE. And to be MCP for me is to ask tough questions, is to face the uncomfortable truth, is to make changes, is to do whatever that is necessary to make sure that Isaac succeeds and is relevant to whatever that we promise to the society. And so the question I want you guys to take away from today and to ask is, what do we want Isaac to sell? What can we do to change? How can we capitalize these external trends to reinvent Isaac to sell so that we no longer face the question of relevance and we can then turn our operation into a profitable operation? Because if your financial situation right now, if more than 50% of your income is spent on paying your MC salary, or if you are not taking your any stipend or salary, then you are running a business wrong. So here is what I want to deliver to you guys via this session, is the journey to refocus Isaac via external trend by taking what is happening outside, applying it to Isaac as an organization in hopes for refocusing Isaac into the volunteerism as well as personal development. So here is something that I wish to deliver to you guys. In terms of promoting volunteerism, which is what Isaac wanted to do at first, is to position Isaac as an organization that understands local needs intimately. You know what are these communities and in-need groups? What do they need in order for them to have a sustainable living, in order for us to improve their livelihood, in order for us to improve the skill set of young children, for example. And we can use our resources to create lasting and sustainable differences. On the other spectrum is focusing on personal development, where Isaac recognized the skill gap of young people, specifically in this pandemic time, and we turn them into qualified and adaptable workforce in this specific time. Now, if you notice these two propositions in front of you, if you focus on volunteerism, there is nothing really on what the volunteers get out of, because that's the definition of volunteerism. You go in as a volunteer, you do not expect to get things out of your experience, you are just there to contribute. Or you come into this organization and you engage with Isaac, and you expect to take away different skill sets, different learnings, so you can become a better person that would eventually place you as a qualified workforce. And the distinction between these two things, according to what is happening around the world right now, is that for promoting volunteerism, Isaac would essentially serve as a platform that mobilizes efforts, that directs all your resources, EPs and members, towards doing specific societal goods, choosing a specific societal need and fixing it or contributing to it. And in personal development is a mass mobilization of talent, where you work with companies and partners to funnel them, train them, and eventually turn them into employees of your partners. If you choose to go towards promoting volunteerism, going back to the 6 external trends, here are some of the trends that you can capitalize on. I've tentatively changed the workplace to community because it fits a little bit better. For community, it's digital-based works for in-need community. For example, you have schools in rural areas that may need translation service for their textbooks and exercise books or novels, so then teachers can use it to teach children that are underprivileged. You have public libraries that may require volunteers to archive different book collections or scientific journals, so on and so forth. Digital-based works that volunteers can volunteer their time and effort to serve communities. Obviously, because pandemic is still happening right now, in different countries, there are vulnerable populations, rural areas that are still in need of support as well as funds. So what you can do in terms of using Isaac as a network is to fundraise, is to provide supplies, deliver masks and syringes to villages, do awareness campaigns, so on and so forth for vulnerable groups. Now, just then, at the start of the session, I talked a little bit about tourism. So for tourism, one of the main things is, in line with what the government is pushing around the world, building a sustainable domestic tourism is going to be a lot of government's main effort. And so Isaac could also funnel through volunteers that would help to build awareness on how to have sustainable domestic tourism. For example, reducing the use of plastic, reducing the dependence on international tourists, increasing awareness on the places that you can go to within the country. Then, in terms of healthcare, there are COVID volunteer mobilizations. Different organizations would require volunteers all the time. Isaac could also step in as health ambassadors as well. Mental health awareness building is a great thing to do right now, and that's certainly one of the things that Isaac could capitalize on. Moving forward, in terms of supply chain, small business volunteering or internship. Like I mentioned before, because of supply chain disruption and border restriction, you see a lot of small business that are impacted. They essentially do not have enough manpower or resources to continue their business, local entrepreneurs as well. And so what Isaac can do is to foster a new generation of volunteers to either help out these small businesses or assist in teaching in teaching new entrepreneurial skills for young people that are interested to start their own business. And that's something that Isaac volunteers can step in. Now, I'm only human. Be it as it may, I can't for the life of me think of what are the trends that are suitable for Isaac to tackle for promoting volunteerism in talent. So I'm going to skip that. For education, there are obviously vulnerable children on IT skills, how to use PowerPoint, Excel, Word, how to use computer, how to connect to internet. More advanced, what is SaaS? How can you actually go into the digital, the tech companies? What can you do to actually prepare yourself for the workforce of the future, as well as raising funds for basic school equipments? So these are all the things that Isaac can, and what I'd argue should, capitalize on, because we have such a huge global network. Now, obviously, I'm not just here sitting and telling you guys what to do. You all know your entity. So let me share some good case practice with you all about real examples of organizations using these as their business model. Habitat for Humanity. They are an organization that goes to rural areas and vulnerable population and build sustainable housing for them. And so because of the pandemic, instead of them sending volunteers to build house, say in Vietnam, this is Habitat for Humanity Vietnam. Instead of sending volunteers to Vietnam, they created an online virtual build where volunteers would follow up virtually on the building progress and raise funds for those that are communities in need over a period of 6 weeks' time. VSO, a UK-based global volunteer organization. Instead of hiring international volunteers, in pandemic time, they pivoted to hiring local volunteers because according to them, quote unquote, these are the people that can hold their government accountable and who understand the context of their own country. And at the same time, they pair them with international skilled volunteers to deliver certain output towards those communities that are in need. Last but not least, UNV, where volunteers can actually sign up for digital-based outputs. For example, the public library example that I've provided just then, the translation service for rural schools that I've provided just then. These are the things that UNV recruited volunteers for in remote volunteering. So now that I've reached this stage, I just wanted to take a quick pause and ask to all of you guys, do you have any questions before I move on to the next subsection for this, which is personal development? If you're still here, just give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and talk to me, or you can just type in the chat and say, all good to go. Give me a thumbs up if you're still here. Lovely. I see a couple of thumbs up. Amazing. Most of you, all right, all of you have thumbs up. Thank you very much. So just to move on, in terms of personal development, again, looking at the 6 different categories for workplace, if you choose to refocus Isaac in the personal development side, what you can do is you can partner with different companies, organizations, and partners. So Isaac essentially becomes a funnel. What you can do is you take charge of training these volunteers, creating workshops and skill-based learning, coaching, mentoring, fostering youth employer dialogue, such as the youth business, youth speak forum, all of these different forums. So then the end goal of these programs is, by the end of the day, these people that engage with Isaac becomes employers. So you track the conversion rate. Then in terms of tourism, again, I can't think of anything. If you have, feel free to put it in the chat. For healthcare, you have raising health awareness, debunking myth and disinformation on COVID or any other mental health issues. You have social media health ambassadors. These are the things that Isaac can leverage our platform and our network to do so. Moving forward, in terms of supply chain, it's small business support as well as coaching new entrepreneurs. Talents, people are looking for jobs. Young graduates are in need of tech-based skills. You can partner with Microsoft, with Apple, with tech-based companies, recruiters, to give them career coaching, to help them to shape their CVs and cover letter, to prepare them for interviews, to again track the funnel, the conversion rate to employees, graduate to employee pipeline. Last but not least, you can also work with organizations that provide skill-based training, such as edX, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, if you can, else work with smaller companies to provide certifications as well. Last but not least, in education, you can also train aspiring educators and volunteers and or any other industry. But the reason why I choose educator is because the world is in need of teachers. And what Isaac can do is that we can funnel young people that are interested in changing community via education and work with schools or with universities to provide them with opportunities and hands-on training and experience. As mentioned, here are some of the examples. Teach for All, again, a global organization that recruits, trains, and places usually graduate teachers over a period of 2 years in rural community to teach for in vulnerable population. The KPI, the main thing I want to point out to you guys is that more than 70% of Teach for All Network alumni continue to work in education or in roles that could impact marginalized communities. And here is also another thing, a food for thought for all of us. How many percent of Isaac volunteers, EPs, or even members stay in social development industry? How many of them that went to education-based GV projects or GT or GE ended up staying in education field? And if we don't have that information, then we need to question ourselves. Why do we not have those information? Is it because we don't track them? Or is it because there simply isn't any? And if And depending on this, we can then ask questions, what went wrong in Isaac's experiences and our funnel. Here is Teach for All. One last example that I want to showcase to you guys is an organization called Tuputoa. So this is a New Zealand-based not-for-profit organization who partnered with Microsoft, basically recruited a bunch of young graduates, giving them free IT-based workshop over a span of 2 to 6 days time with certification, and then they partner with companies to hire these young graduates. And that is something that Isaac could potentially tap into as well, given our presence in universities. So after going through both of these segments, I want to just conclude the first section that in order for Isaac to capitalize on external trends, it's not enough for us to see, hey, this is good, we should do this. Rather, Isaac should focus on establishing a very solid internal identity before we can then capitalize on external trend. Because if you don't stand for something, if there is no solid foundation that you're standing on, if the value proposition is weak, you would be questioned by people, by partners, by members, and by volunteers. Why should I spend money on Isaac? Why should I spend time on Isaac? And if you say, focus, Isaac, on promoting volunteerism, and you work based on a specific industry and a specific focus, then you can build your value proposition, you can build your proposal, you can get funding, and you can then train your members so that they are extremely focused and extremely good in solving or contributing to one particular external problem. So at this point of time, I want to just give you guys a 3 to 5 minutes time for you guys to just quietly journal, take a piece of paper and a pen, or using a laptop, just to write down, if you can choose one focus, focusing on volunteerism or focusing on personal development based on your country's context and your entity's context, and pick 2 trends out of it, what would be relevant for your entity? All right, so I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes time just to very quickly note down by yourself. All right, give me a thumbs up just to let me know that you're still here and that you understood the instruction. Lovely. 3 minutes starting now. In case if you have any questions, feel free to deposit them in the chat. Thank you very much, Min, for sending over the link. As usual, go towards the link, ice.ec/CEO, for you to take your notes over there. Thanks, Min. Welcome back. If I can have your attention back to the screen here, that would be amazing. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you're back here? Give me a thumbs up if you're back here. Lovely. I am going to open the space for one MCPE to share. If anyone cares to share your answer on this, just let me hear a bit on your thought. I see we have someone that I haven't greeted just yet. Hi, Alisa. Hello. Yes, so anyone cares to unmute and share what your thoughts are for this question? All right.
I can go, not because of the points. I think for me, the one I want to say volunteerism, but at the same time, I think personal development is something that Australia focuses a lot on, just because there are so many opportunities. I think at the end of the day, coming out of the COVID pandemic, a lot of people want to find opportunities for themselves to grow professionally. So a lot of the things that you've mentioned before, like Y2B forums and uh, bottom line is like just personal and career development. I'm sorry, there's going to be lots of notifications, but like the more things to do with like career development and personal development in their respective what's it called? I don't even know what the labels are, but in their respective fields, because they know that coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of skills that they've missed out on, especially on the social aspect of things, as well as like the the hard skills, since they had to learn behind the screen. So those are the current trends that I think are relevant for Australia.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that amazing answer. Yeah, that's actually right on the mark as well. I think what I've noticed over the last 2 years is that a lot of Isaac entities do generally transition towards the more personal development side of things, and so it is not unusual for entities to start looking into building, career-based skills as well as developing young talents to so they can join workforce. So thank you very much, Elisa. So moving on, that sort of concludes the first part of the capitalizing on external trend. And now let's move to the second part of this session, which is the last part of the session. Now, assuming if you do choose to embrace a particular focus and a particular trend or two, and you have to make changes to your organization, one thing we have to understand is that whenever there are new changes, there will be new risks. And that's something that I want to cover in this session today as well. And so to me, a very simple concept to remember is that risk management, at least personally to me, is a spectrum. You can either actively manage new changes, put in place systems, policies, structures, so on and so forth, so that it becomes active change. Or if you don't do that good enough, you then actively manage fire, which is what a lot of entities start doing when pandemic started happening, because we're simply not prepared for pandemic. And this is not just a unique Isaac problem. Most companies around the world are not uniquely prepared for pandemic because none of us knew pandemic is going to happen. And so looking at how fast and how fluid this world changed, we have to always keep in mind, as MC and as MCP, our main focus is choosing what are the changes that most likely brings about the biggest risk reward, or what are the changes that we can do right now that would prevent certain risk from happening in the future. And so it's either you managing change or you managing fire. And taking that into in mind, what we want to do in first step of managing risk is we need to identify and categorize these risks first. And so there are 3 different categories that I would like to present to you guys. First one is known knowns. These are the risks that you know existed, you know exactly what they are. You're very familiar with this risk, that you are very certain of when it will happen, what kind of effect it will occur, shall it happen. These are the known risk. Then you have the known unknown, risk that we think can happen, but we don't know when it will happen, and we also don't know the impact of which it will occur. Last but not least is the unknown unknowns, where it's beyond imagination. No matter how hard you think, it is impossible to find or impossible to think of in advance. So here are some examples for some known risks. Financial sustainability of Isaac, of your entity, legality status. Maybe you are not registered properly in your country. You have a low retention of members, very high turnover. You have very weak pipeline, maybe just one applicant for one position. That is very weak pipeline. So here are some of the examples for known. And different entities and different countries may have different known risk, but it's always important for us to categorize and look at it from a category perspective. And so what are the known unknowns? For example, known unknowns could be a loss of key resources. For example, your office would suddenly be taken back by the landlord. there are new competitors, that are similar to Isaac, but different. They capitalize on the youth market and then they take away Isaac's market share. Then you have market shift, as we see in pandemic, where you have from international development to local development. Then you have geopolitical events such as war, international border conflicts, so on and so forth, as well as acts of gods, for example, disaster, pandemic, all different things that are categorized as natural occurring events. And so, can someone maybe just type in one or two unknown unknowns in the chat? Just what's your thought? What are some of the unknown unknowns? What do you think are some of the risks that are categorized under unknown unknowns? Just type in the chat. There is no shame in getting it wrong. War, okay. Any other thoughts on unknown unknowns? Zombie. It's actually likely. You got to prepare yourself for doomsday event. Any other answers? What are some of the unknown unknowns? What do you guys think? I'll give 10 seconds more for you to put in some thoughts for unknown unknowns. Climate change, virus. Great, thank you very much. All very good answer, but unknown unknowns, as its name implies, we have no way of knowing and we can't imagine it beforehand. That's why it's unknown unknown. So take, for example, pandemic, war and virus, right? All of these things, we can imagine it, we can anticipate it, we just don't know when it will happen or how big it's going to happen and how much impact it's going to cause us. So whatever things that we can think of and that we can imagine are all of the things that we can, again, anticipate, but we don't know when it's going to happen. For unknown unknowns, the very definition itself is that you can't think of it in advance, you can't imagine it, therefore you can't, it's very hard for you to prepare for it. And so looking at all of these things, right, there is one particular thing that I want to bring all of you to your attention is that as MCPE, again, congratulations to all of you for getting elected. I'm pretty sure that's a grueling process, but job well done. But as MCPE, during your application process, you would have done your research on your entity's risks. And while you're doing your planning as well, some of these risks may be very familiar to you. And so in the next minute or two, just again, back in your spreadsheet, just list down some of your entity's known risk, things that you are anticipating and things that you know when it's going to occur. Just go back to there. I'll give you about a minute or two. Just very quickly list down what are some of the known risks for your entity. I'm going to play music for now. Give me a, thank you very much. Give me a thumbs up if you're back here. And if you're still with me, lovely. I see a couple of thumbs up. All right, welcome back. Hopefully, again, that has been an interesting walk towards your memory lane on the pain you have to go through to do your MCP research for your MCP application. So just a very quick look through the spreadsheet itself. I see some of the known risk are financial reserve, legal risk, like taxation. Let's see, what are some of the other risks that are known? Yeah, then you have like Zoom fatigue, brand reputation, poor membership pipeline, so on and so forth. Right, so actually a lot of very similar known risk in Isaac. And it's not surprising because these are the risks that has always been in Isaac, even 5 years before. These are always every single term. If you refer back to your predecessor's application package, your predecessor's application package, you will always see more or less the same risk in your entity. And so moving forward as well, I just want to bring to your attention how to actually manage and mitigate these risks. And we're actually going to start very simply with the unknown first. Now, as its name implies, unknown are events that we cannot possibly imagine and we can't possibly anticipate. And so the only thing that we can do is when these things happen, what we need to do is that when unknown risk happen, a new thing that completely caught you off guard, first you need to do is to identify the root cause of those things, of why this crisis or this risk take place, why these things happen. After you've identified that root cause, you need to raise issue early and prepare a plan. Now, what I mean by raise issue early is that often as MCP, we are sort of like the parent for the organization. We find it very difficult sometimes to be very honest to our membership on, these are the very serious risks that we're facing right now. Because either it's very hard for us to explain to the members, or it's very hard for us to provide, explanation or solution to those things, simply because we don't know what to do. But one thing in particular is whenever there is a risk or a crisis that happen, regardless of what it is, it's always important to raise these issues very, very early on and be super transparent on how you problem solve these things, even if you do not have a solution. Because doubts as well as uncertainties only start to surface when you keep quiet, when you keep it as a secret, when you are not transparent on how you're going about solving it. Even if today you're having a meeting, tell your members that these are the meetings that we've done, these are the steps that we've taken to try and solve these problems. So keep the transparency and keep the team updated. Last but not least, once all of this is made known, flag this issue as a known unknown for the future and make sure transition this and put this as part of a transition package to your successor so they know that this particular risk exists and this is what you've done. Now, that's for unknown. Here's a little bit more exciting. For known unknown risk, what you need to do is first, you need to document assumptions. Take one of the known unknown, say for example, say war. You document assumptions. What are the assumptions of this particular risk? What is going to happen? Borders going to shut down. Key resources from that particular country is not going to flow in. There will be inflation. People are not going to go to work. Transportation is going to be severely impacted, so on and so forth. You pick a risk, you document your assumptions, you share and have a discussion space with people that are directly impacted. Say, for example, if there are going to be an impending inflation in your particular country because of particular risk, and the spending power of people is going to be severely reduced, people are going to hoard cash. And when cash is king, what Isaac needs to do to protect your financial reserve? Should you cash out from your bank? Should you invest this in certain different things? Should you ask your members to donate in this particular fund, so on and so forth? Once you've documented these assumptions, share and discuss with relevant parties, you need to prepare an alternative plan to your main strategy. What I mean by that is you have what you want to do throughout the year. In case this risk happen, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to scale back, how we're going to pivot, how we're going to handle this, who are the task force, so on and so forth. Preparing that plan and including contingency in your cost and structure. What I mean by that is, if your entire term is going to take 50K to run, and now you have these several alternative plans to which maps out your known unknown risk, it's going to take at least 10K more for you to be safe. Your budget for the term should be 60K, not 50K. And that's including contingency in your cost and your schedule. How to actually mitigate and manage your known risk. For me personally, these are the two things that I like to do. One is using McKinsey 7S, and the second one is a combination of a simple change management plan. If you do not know of McKinsey 7S, a very quick rundown on this. This is basically an organizational risk management framework as well as planning framework, where you look at 7 different things that are categorized into two different specific categories. You have the hard elements, which are strategy, structure, and system. And you have the soft elements, which are shared value, skills, staff, and style. So very quickly introducing to you guys on all these things. Structure is how you can structure your organization's people to achieve your strategy. Strategy is, as its name implies, what are the things you need to put in place for you to solve a specific problem or to create a new specific product. System is what are the platforms, technologies, materials, and systems that you need to put in place, or policies that you need to put in place to ensure quality and quantity. Skills is your people's skill set. What kind of training, what kind of skills do they need to have in order to succeed in their role to deliver your strategy? Staff is what kind of training that you provide to them, what kind of profile that you recruit for, what kind of people that you staff your organization with. Style is more on leadership management style. What kind of leadership style you use? How do you motivate people? How do you keep people accountable? How do you reward or incentivize efforts? Last but not least is shared values. What are the vision? What's the mission? What's the principle? What's the purpose of this organization in your entity? So looking at these McKinsey 7S, I have, before we move on to the example, I have a quick question that I want you guys to just put in the chat. Type in your entity's name and let me know if engagement with Isaac product, any sort of EWA focuses products is a strong focus for your entity and is expected to generate profits for your term. I'm pretty sure when you're doing your MCP application, you would have specific focus. So if EWA is a focus for your entity, let me know. If EWA is not, just say it's not. So type in your entity's name and let me know if EWA is a strong focus. I assume Indonesia, yes. So Indonesia, Thailand, Japan, Australia, MOC, Myanmar, Vietnam. This may be an easier way of answering to anyone who is not going to focus on EWA. New Zealand is looking more into the prospect, still in planning. Anyone that is not focusing on EWA, any entity, just give me a thumbs up if you are not focusing on EWA in your term. Lovely. So everyone in this call focuses on EWA. Now, this is part of the preparation that I've done prior to running this session to come up with certain materials and certain talking points. I went to all of your respective MC Facebook pages, downloaded all of your, and I've asked the regional office to send me all your application package, as well as looking into all your MC team announcement, as well as MC application package to see what your structures are and what your focuses are. And so taking McKinsey 7S as an example, looking into structure, what kind of structure should be in, what we first need to acknowledge is the typical Isaac structure spans MCP, which are all of you. You have a team of people. And amongst these people, some of them may have LCVPs, some may not have, depending on your entity. And some of these LCVPs may have their own TLs, and some of these functions may have their members. This is generally how the organization structure looks in Isaac. And looking into your respective entities, this is the analysis of your entity. All of the entity, with New Zealand as more or less an exception, not exception, but close to it, most of the entities, if not all, says that they are going to focus on EWA. Excluding your MCP, these are the team sizes that are announced or that you are looking for. And the number of MCVP EWA that you have or recruited or is going to recruit, the number of exchange MCVP that you recruited or you're going to recruit, and taking EWA divided by exchange to find how much you're actually focusing on EWA. And what we see in this simple analysis is that none of the entities, not one entity in AP has more EWA MCVP than exchange MCVP. At most, you have equal amount. So 1 to 1 or 3 to 3. You will see some 0.5, 1.5. That is people double hatting, double profiling. They are EWA and some other function. None of the entities have more EWA MCVP than your exchange MCVP. There are some entities that are focusing on EWA, but you don't have MCVP EWA. You may say that it's MCVP BD that is doing EWA, but if we all know when we're double hatting, we tend to focus on one thing over the other. And so looking at all of this, it's very clear to understand that if you have more MCVP exchange, you would have more members and you have more money that's pumped into that particular function, more training and effort that is spent on doing something that doesn't generate profit. This doesn't make sense. If you want your EWA to generate money, if you want your EWA to be the function that brings in relevance, you should have more members, more MCVPs, more money and time and training in EWA, not the other way around. So looking at this example, in terms of structure using McKinsey 7S, you should restructure your entity to reflect your strategy. That's how you use McKinsey 7S as part of your change management and risk management. Because one thing in particular is the known risk has always been very high turnover, very weak pipeline, and members needing to go through clarity of why session every single conference. If our why is so strong and so relevant, why do we need to tell them over and over and over again every half a year? There must be some problem inside there. And if your main focus is EWA, then you should have the most amount of member in EWA. So what I want you guys to do right now is I want you guys to just choose one of your immediate known risk out of the list that you've mentioned just then. Write down which S applies to managing the change and the risk. Say, for example, member retention or low leadership pipeline, structure, skills, and maybe staff applies to it. Is it clear? Give me a thumbs up if the requirement is clear. Lovely. I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this.
Wear your heart on your sleeve these days.
You know then.
Yes, I know.
Don't sit there looking at me like that.
What do you want, Emma? What will make you happy?
I can't explain.
I understand. I am old, and you're young and beautiful. This is your first love. You are my last.
I can go if it's okay.
Lovely, yes.
Cool. So for me, I put membership criteria or like kind of the membership status, because for New Zealand we're membership action and ideally want to go to full member. So the ones that I did from my knowledge is systems. So I relate systems to criteria. So what criteria do we need? Sorry, what criteria do we need to fulfill in order to gain the membership status? And then also strategy, which I refer to timeline. So when do we have to have certain things done by, and how to kind of be accountable for that timeline.
Lovely.
And then that's that.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your sharing. One more slot available. Anyone else would like to take a shot? All right. That is all the time that I have for this. And if no one wants to take it, then I am going to move on, because much like opportunities in Isaac, it comes and goes. And if you choose not to, it will go. So moving forward with regards to this as well, once you've identified the risk that you want to tackle, specifically on your known risk, and you've identified for each of this risk, what are some of the S that you could use to help you to formulate a strategy or a solution to make changes to it, rather, be it creating a new product, be it solving your financial sustainability, be it changing your pricing model, be it updating your legality status, be it changing your organization from an NGO to an NPO, for example, whichever it, or even restructuring the entire exchange function, regardless of what kind of S you use, there are going to be changes. And once you've identified those changes, here is a very simple change management plan that my team created back then in 1819 that helped us to go through several major changes in the entity, which proved to be quite successful. And it's a 7-point change management plan. First is to identify what are the points of changes. What exactly is going to change? I'll give an example. Say restructuring an entire function. You're closing down one function and you're shifting it to somewhere else. What exactly changes? You have members not being in the same function. They're going to get reallocated. You have VPs that are elected and trained that will be losing their function and will need to be retrained. You have MCVPs who may need to take off one hat and put on the other, who needs to be retrained again, so on and so forth. Identifying exactly what are the things that will change. Once you've done that, you identify what are the affected stakeholders, who's going to be affected. So using that example, the members of that particular function are going to be affected. The current customers of that particular function is going to be affected. Any partners that are partnering with that function is going to be affected. MCVPs and the regional office is going to be affected. Once you've identified that, you have to identify what's the area that they are going to be affected. So for example, for the members that are affected, they are going to lose their membership status if they choose not to stay in Isaac or get reallocated. For VPs, they are going to have problem with their pipeline or their trainings, for example, or immediate output. For clients, it may be quality assurance, the quality of experience that they're expecting. Then, once you've had these things, these three things, you can then come up with proposed solutions to these changes. So you have a risk, you use McKinsey 7S, these are the change you want to make, these are the specific things that will change, who's going to get affected by this change, how are they going to be affected, and how can you then propose to solve these challenges. For example, members that are in this particular function A, if you want to relocate them, the solution is you will retrain them and reallocate them to function B. LCVPs, rather than say, for example, asking your LCPs to sack them, no, they are going to be transitioned over to a new function, or they are going to be the second LCVP for another function. Or all of them are going to be recruited to become a national task force to do a particular innovation project, for example. So depending on who's affected, how they are affected, you come up with smaller solutions to help them to manage this change. Once you've had this proposed solution, you figure out the communication plan. Who talks to who on these changes and these solutions? Second last, and when you will deliver this communication. Say, for example, you can have a big session in a conference, in your national conference, to talk about these changes. Or you can have your commission meeting to deliver this small scale changes, or just an email. So how and when should they actually start to communicate? Then last but not, figuring out the timeline as well as, where to communicate in the conference, in the meeting, in an email, in a one-to-one, so on and so forth. So once you've identified and put these 7 things into a spreadsheet, it becomes increasingly clear how to go about managing these changes. You would have an entire timeline built for you, just based on what changes you need to, what solutions you're going to put in place, who's talking to who. You would have an entire timeline in mind. And just to put this into action, this is a screenshot of the actual change management plan that we use using these 7 points. And as you can see, these are the points of changes, affected stakeholders, all the way down to how we communicate to them. Using this, we've identified 12, 17 major changes that require some form of major plannings like this, to which we gradually implement them over the timeline which we want to. And one of the good case practice is just in the first 3 months of our term, we abolish a failing product. We transitioned, we retrained and reallocated the entire members into different functions. We created new departments. We have all the LCVPs that are in that function were retrained and reallocated to somewhere else, still LCVPs, and ended up producing quite a good productivity rate and result in my term using this particular change management. If my memory serves me correct, 80% of these reallocated members eventually stayed in Isaac to another term. So yeah, that's how we use this change management plan to drive new changes. And so the one thing just to cap off the entire second segment of this is that we understood, especially over the last 2 years, the major learning is that the world is going to keep changing. And if we are still operating Isaac using yesteryear's operation model, if we're still focusing using 2 years ago pre-pandemic's focus, if our structure remains identical to 2 years before, then we're not really changing with times. And if you don't change, you get eliminated. It's as simple as that. And so if change is the only constant, then we must prepare plans for and of change. So just to recap before we end this 1.5 hour session, to capitalize on external trends and new things, new shiny things that Isaac should do, we must first establish a very solid internal identity. We must choose a particular focus. Only then we can plan using the McKinsey 7S and go towards different changes and manage them to prevent them to become a risk down the line. And so that concludes the session. Thank you very much again for all your attention. I see that Indonesia has asked 2 questions in the spreadsheet. I am going to allocate 4 minutes to answer questions as fast as I can. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. For now, let me answer Indonesia's question. Indonesia has been answered. All right, has been answered. Lovely. Any additional questions that you may have, feel free to put it in the chat over the next 2 minutes time. Or you can unmute and ask to everyone as well.
I have a question.
Lovely.
It's more towards because I find it hard for people to understand, or the entity to understand why changes are needed because they themselves don't know. So how have you in the past successfully made the change management in such a way that they actually see the context of why we're doing what we're doing, or why the change has to even happen?
Lovely. So I think I would point to a real life example that happened recently. So recently there is a tech company that went viral in Reddit, TikTok, and some other social medias, where the CEO basically have a Zoom call in 15 minutes time, basically fired 500 employees over a Zoom call. And then he left the call in 15 minutes time. That is borderline heartless. Now, we would say that that is a major change to the organizational structure, maybe a change in strategy. But for the CEO to just sit in a Zoom call and tell, hey, you're going to be fired in 15 minutes time, that is not the way to manage change. And that, again, is how most ISACers or MC usually approach change. We figured, hey, in MC, we have the biggest context. We have all of this different research and reasoning and purpose and partnership. And sometimes it's very hard for us to talk to members because of two different reasons. One, we simply assume that they do not have the required knowledge or capacity to understand these changes. Or two, we do not spend enough time and effort in these. So as an example, in my term, when we reach the conclusion that we are going to abolish the entire product, which, by the way, is the first product of ISAC in Cambodia, has been ongoing for 10 years. Every year we lose money in that. Every year we have problem with that. Major legality issue. No MC wants to touch on it because it's a very sensitive thing. But the moment we reached that conclusion, the entire MC team, I myself included, sat one-on-one with every LC, and every single member went through the entire planning and guided them through the entire thought process of why we feel we need to abolish this. And before we tell them, we've already mapped out what is going to happen to them. Because, say, for example, if I want to abolish this, right, because LC and MC's timeline is overlapped. So if you want to abolish this term, LCP is going to ask you, what's going to happen to my LCVP? Can't you abolish it next term? That means you will need to run a failing product for 6 months just to protect 5 people's feeling. Rather than that, what you can do is you mapped out these group of people. We are going to spend 3 months to retrain them. Here's a new initiative that they are going to be a part of this. All of these members, this is the concrete training plan for them. If they so choose to, they can choose whichever function they want to go to, and we'll support them. No one is going to lose their position. No one is going to lose their relevance. This is all done so we can move ISAC in the right direction. At the same time, taking care of the development. So 3 different things you need to do. One is to make it personal. Spend time with the members, sit down and talk to them. Guide them through the thought process. Some is going to disagree with you. Some is going to agree with you. Regardless, spend that time. Number 2, talk to your LCPs. LCP is your biggest support system. Onboard them first. Let them be your support system, because when LCVPs don't know what to do, they are going to listen to LCPs, not you. So if you have LCP on your side, change is easy. And the third one is you go through the change management plan and you identify who will be affected, what needs to be done. So whatever question they throw you, you have answer to. Yeah, so that's the 3 ways that I would suggest on change. Any other question? We are fast approaching the end of the session. Thank you very much, Elisa. Very good question. One last question, if I may. If you absolutely have no question, just give me a thumbs up so I know that you have no question, and then I can move on. Lovely. Thank you very much. With that in mind, I just wanted to again appreciate all of you for your kind attendance and your attention. Thank you very much for inviting me back to ISAC to deliver this session. It's been a blast talking to all of you. Again, a little bit of a shameless plug. If you want to stay connected, here's my LinkedIn and here's my Instagram. So yeah, shameless plug. But yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I wish you all the best. Congratulations for your newfound position. And I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jack. I think first of all, I would like to on behalf of everyone, send you the appreciation for giving us a very insightful section. Yeah, and I think working with Jack is very interesting because is it lacking? It's normal, right? Because if you work with Jack, he will have challenging question for you that you can be more objective driven and then more practical, so we can have very clear outcome. Yeah, and Yeah, and I think he also did a lot of research to prepare for the section today, you know, like read through of your application and then also like the case from external side also. Yeah, so I think like to appreciate Jack, right? Let's unmute yourself and then we can say like so proud of you for Jack, okay? Yeah, okay, unmute yourself, okay. So proud of you. So proud of you.
Proud of you.
So proud of you.
So proud of you.
Proud of you.
Proud of you.
Okay, it's a bit awkward to do it online. Yeah, but yeah, thank you a lot, Jack, for coming back and then giving us like a very amazing section. Yeah, and then if you want, like you can still invite him to share, you know, like your section in your NET. So again, right, so we have the sheet here, like where you can put the question. So if you still have like, any other one, yeah, you can just write here and then so maybe like he can maybe reply us like through emails or like yeah. Then for I think so I think I have like AB MCB com. So it's actually optional for MCDE. So you can decide like, whether you want to join or not. So we will mainly cover 3 topics. First one is about TUT transition, and second one it will be about ED Lab finance. So ED Lab is like an initiative from our side that collect the input and then the data. So this one it will be about finance. Yeah. And then we will talk about like last sprint, yeah, for the current MC term. Yeah. Then we will have MCB O2O offer on demand as well. Yeah. So if you want to have like O2O with your NET coach, you can just approach the person. If you don't know who is your NET coach, so you can ask your MCB current. Yeah, but I think like you all know. So you can ask, like you can talk about any topic that you want. Maybe it can be MC structure, selection, planning if you're doing it. So you can just feel free. Yeah. Okay. And then yeah, I think that's all for today. And then I think let's have like 3 minutes. So you can help give us the feedback here. Yeah. So you see there is like this column for April week 1. Yeah, I play one song and then let's go here and then do the feedback.